I had been teaching at Parsons and working with students for a long time, but I started to see things that made me a little bit worried. And so a lot of things were happening with at Parsons and also other universities. A lot of universities were spending like tremendous amount of money building these giant buildings. So Parsons, the school that I was teaching at, was built a giant building on the campus, and like Cooper Union, which is another school in New York, spent a lot of money building these kind of giant buildings, and that made me a little nervous. And then I was seeing also these universities were like opening campuses and places that I didn't feel very comfortable about. So especially like NYU would have, they'd make like a campus in Dubai, or and this sort of thing like made me really nervous. And then the other thing is that it just was getting more and more expensive. So I don't know how it works here, but in America, higher education is crazy expensive. And it was expensive when I was a graduate student, but now if you go to study at Parsons or NYU, it's really terrible amount of debt that students have to go into to study. And so we were seeing all of these things, like in New York, there's a school called Cooper Union that for 100 years has been free. So there was a really rich person named Peter Cooper. He started a school, and he gave it a ton of money, and he said, I want this to be a free school for studying, art and design. And for 100 years it had been free, and then they spent a lot of money on a big building, and now it's not free. Now you have to pay tuition. And so it was crazy to see like the students, these are the students, they took over the president's office, and they were protesting. But all of this was happening where I was feeling like there's a lot of things happening at university that I don't understand. This was at the graduation, they'll turn their backs. And so some friends and I, this is Taeyoon Choi, Amit Pataru, and Jen Lowe, we started thinking about alternatives and kind of alternative models for education. So there are a lot of these schools in New York, these kind of experimental schools. So on the one side you have like these famous expensive schools, and the other side you have these kind of experimental models for learning. And thinking a lot about different types of ways of organizing pedagogy. And at a really simple level, like I like this diagram a lot, which is to explain kind of what a school can be is really a mixture of haves and wants, and finding a way to draw the right arrow between the have and the want. So we started this school about 4 years ago called the School for Poetic Computation. We were working on our logo. And we were really thinking about, how could we make our own thing? My father taught in the high school where I grew up, and he would do this experiment. This is in the late 70s, where he would take students to farm. Like he did this alternative, he was at the local high school, but he did this alternative school within a school. And he took the students to, dairy farms upstate, and they would live, on the farm. He would drive students around Chicago and do these experiments that were getting them out of the school and doing things, in the world. And I kind of grew up around that, so that's a picture of me with some kids. And my mother was a Lamaze teacher, so she taught women who were pregnant like different strategies for giving birth, and like ways to give birth without a lot of medicine. And so in my mind, I always had this idea that you could create your own school, and so that's what we have been doing. And we focused on this idea of poetry. I'll talk a little bit about the motivation, and then I'll talk about how the school is run. I really like poetry. Poetry is this beautiful thing where if you go to a bookstore, this is a bookstore called St. Mark's Bookstore, you always have to go like way to the back of the bookstore. And there's this little section in the back of the bookstore, which is the poetry section. And I really like it just as an idea, which is that this is, to me, it feels like this really honest part of the bookstore, where people are making you know, these very small books. There's a lot of self-published books or small printing presses, and nobody's making a lot of money writing poetry, but they're doing really, it's beautiful expression of what it means to be human or what it means to be alive. And so we got excited about this idea of poetry. I'll talk about some of the inspirations. We're really inspired by this woman, Red Burns. Red Burns was a filmmaker, and she started a program in New York called ITP, which is the Inter-Telecommunications Program. And she had a lot of really beautiful ideas about making art with technology. And she passed away maybe 4 years ago. And at her funeral, they gave you these fortune cookies that were full of things that she had written. And so the one that I got says that the poetry drives you, not hardware. She has these great ideas for students, and she created a really rich environment for people to make great work in. Also, Carol Becker, who's the dean of the art school in Columbia, which is a university in New York. And Carol Becker writes really beautifully about art school, about the potential for art school. She's one of the best authors, I think, about what art school could be. And she has this statement, which is that artists should be sitting at the table. So when important decisions are being made, like a government or a company or somebody's making an important decision, that you should have room at the table for artists. Because not to represent artists, but that being trained as an artist helps you in decision making, and it helps you, helps that the world would be a better place if artists could be at the table. One of the things that we focus on at the school is asking questions. And so on the application, when students apply to the school, we actually ask them, what do you want the school to be? And that's really beautiful, because you start to see, like, the school really, we have some idea of the form of it. It's a 10-week program. People, apply and come to study with us for 10 weeks at a time. But we ask this question, what do you want the school to be? And then we use the answer to that, and that shapes how we design the school. And on the first day of class, actually the first thing that we do is we ask people to write down all the questions that they have in their head. And it's actually really amazing. They sit by themselves, and you say, just take 20 minutes and write down every question that you have that brought you to this room. Why did you come to study here? And people just sit silently by themselves and just write questions. And then they get into groups and they look at the questions, and then we all come together, we look at all the questions. And we create almost like a document that is every single question that everybody has. And we organize them, we print it out, we put it on the wall. And usually when you come to university, the professor will give you a syllabus, and they're almost saying, like, here's the journey that we're going to take. And it's really interesting when you start the conversation about questions rather than answers. When you say, what is it that we want to learn? And some questions are easy to answer. So we'll print it out, we'll put it on the wall, and some people will just like cross off the question. There are students that I call them completionists. And they just want to just cross off every answer. Some students will say, like, come talk to me, or like, that. Some questions are impossible to answer, right? They're unanswerable questions, and those are interesting too. But more than anything, questions lead to conversation, and conversation leads to learning, right? Questions lead to discussion and people interacting with each other.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to take the table out so more people can come in? Or so
yeah, maybe we could grab some more chairs too.
Yeah, there's more chairs. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
It's pretty late. It looks like it's a fake.
Are you going to be okay there, or you want to be somewhere else?
I think I'm here, it would be perfect. So
Thank you very much.
There's one more seat.
Probably this table.
oh, there?
I'll check you. Standing or sitting?
I will be standing. I have to.
I don't know if it can. It's easy to move.
This one.
I don't know if this table can move or not. Do you want to move this table?
Collapsible?
Is it collapsible?
Yeah. I was really feeling this problem over. This is double the size.
Wow.
Oh, George. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, and we're back.
Are we good? Welcome, everybody. To quickly explain, I am super happy to be here. I'm going to just say why I'm here, because a bunch of people just came in. I'm super happy to be here in Hong Kong. I was filming for a project in Shanghai, and I didn't have enough time to get a visa, and so the way to do it is to go to Shanghai and then come somewhere else. And I was in Hong Kong maybe 2 months ago, gave a talk at the university, and I loved it and wanted to come back, so I'm super excited to be back. So,
What are you looking for in Hong Kong?
nothing. Just make some new friends. I was in Shanghai for a project. So yeah, Hong Kong. I'm looking for a gift for my 7-year-old. So I walked around Kowloon, and I will probably go back tonight and try to find something. Okay, and I will talk about the school. I'm talking about the School for Poetic Computation. Then I'll talk about the kind of daily sketching and artwork that I make. So the school, when we started the first day, we asked questions. We come up with this list of questions, which is really beautiful. And we have a structure. There are teachers, but a lot of it is also kind of self-driven with students. And we focus on different things. So I'll explain some of the influences, but we're organized really in 3 parts. There's code, electronics, and theory. And so I mostly work on the code side and help organize the teachers that teach about programming and using computation for creative means. There's also electronics, which is learning how to build computers and learning how to build circuits, both like at a really fundamental level, like how does electricity work and how do you do logic with electricity, but then also like practical level, like Arduino and making things that help you make things, and theory, which is about reading and writing and interacting with art, and do a lot of walking tours because we're in New York. There's a really interesting history, so it's really 3 parts, and really feeling like the study of number and mathematical theory, using it for artistic purposes. So I love this quote. This is one of the students who studies poetry in Australia. He says, instead of reading Kerouac, young poets should read Claude Shannon's Mathematical Theory of Communication. And really just like trying to find the poetic parts of computation. And thinking about numbers and what do numbers mean and software. This is a book that we found really inspiring. This is called Uncreative Writing by Kenneth Goldsmith. It's a really amazing book because he teaches these, he's a writing professor, and he teaches these classes where you're not allowed to write any new words, that you can use any words that you find, right? You can use text that exists, that you find, but you're not allowed to add any new words, but you can use words that exist in some new way. And this is all about kind of creative approach to language. He has it's a great book called Uncreative Writing. and poetry. This is a really good example of a inspiration for the school. This is an artist in Canada named Elodie Lorraine, and she created this book called Vast, which I find really beautiful. It's a book that's completely made out of text, but it's not legible text. It's like really an enigmatic book, but it tells a story. Like there's a story that happens on the pages, and that she's almost painting with text, and there's something really like, you know, kind of I don't know. I find really magical about this book, and I love in the book she says, "For when we meet," and she just signs it. This is a talk about some of the people that come to work with students. This is an artist named Brian House, who is a sound artist, and he works on data visualization using sound, and he creates interesting projects around that. A lot of what we do in the school is focus on using your hands and trying to get away from computer screens. Oh, sorry. These are out of order. Sorry. A few more artists. Just artists that come to visit. Kristen Sun Kim is a Korean sound artist who was born deaf, and she works with sound. And there's something really beautiful in her, really amazing in her approach to sound, because it's about what sound feels like and other ways of appreciating sound. And she came to work with students, and it was really amazing, really magical. Sara Hendren is a designer based in Boston, and she works in the field of assistive technology and really thinking about how we can use, like assistive design practices. So how we can use design in interesting ways to help people that have different disabilities. But she does all kinds of cool workshops. Like she did this workshop with building ramps. She did it with people who are wheelchair bound and also skateboarders. So people in wheelchairs and skateboarders working together and kind of jamming on ramp design. And but her work's really beautiful. So we have people come and work with students. In the school, we focus a lot on using hands and trying to think about things like, you know, most, I don't know, kind of digital art education is like using a computer screen and sitting in a room full of computers. And we would rather not be doing that. So things like actually building the circuitry, learning about how to build a computer from scratch, and or learning about things like building physical objects to teach different concepts like binary numbers. We do a lot of work with paper, so building kind of paper prototypes to understand things like logic. I'm teaching image processing, and the students are acting like pixels. So trying to understand how blurring works, but they're like holding up their value, and theory is really important. So we spend a lot of time kind of studying reading and writing around art. Drawing is an important part of the school. So I think like the computer is built on layers and layers of abstraction. Right, there's so many systems that are happening. Like when at a fundamental level, when you type a letter, like you type the word Google, like what happens? That somebody has written this amazing. There's like a long article about all of the things that happen from the moment that you touch the key to you seeing something on the screen. There's layers and layers of abstraction, and I think in order to combat that, drawing and metaphor can be really useful. So the students do a lot of work with creating comic books or creating drawings or illustrations. We do things like, sometimes I will give a lecture, and then the students have to go to the dollar store and buy, they only have a limit of $2, and then they have to buy something to explain the concept using something that they could buy for a couple dollars. So I can't remember what the toilet paper was explaining. I'm sure it was awesome. Another thing that I think is really important is just be in the space together. So we've been in probably 3 different locations in Brooklyn, and now we're in New York. We do a lot of eating together and having meals. I had this dream when I went to graduate school. I had this dream that I would be like drinking wine and arguing with my classmates, and it totally wasn't like that. But at SFBC, it's kind of like that. So we hang out in the space together. And I'll kind of talk about people who are our role models and then how we take things, take their lessons. So this is Margaret Hamilton. She's one of the programmers for the Apollo moon landing. And here she is with a printout of the code. And so we do things like we print out code. So this is a student named Sara Palermo. She was really interested in this JavaScript code, and she printed it out. And so usually when you're working with code, you work with it on a computer screen. But it's actually kind of terrible. It's terrible it's text, and it's really hard to read things. It's hard to read and write things, just with this like little window. So the students do things like print out code and try to mark everything that they do understand and that they don't understand and interact with the code in a different way. We try to approach things in different ways. So this was really beautiful. Like she took the code that she was interested in, she annotated it, and then we put that on the wall and kind of living with that. I'm going to show you some different projects that students have made. This is a student named Simona De Rosa. And she was really interested in data visualization and also cooking. So she had a background in like a culinary background, and she did this amazing experiment where you can, when you have ingredients that you're cooking with, like raspberries or chocolates, those ingredients are made out of different compounds, right? There's at a lower level, those things like cinnamon, there's like compounds that those things are made out of. And she studied the mathematical so these are like these are two things like smoked salmon and cranberry. And she studied the mathematical similarity. So you can compute, if you have a list of two lists of things, you can compute mathematically how similar or dissimilar they are, right? There's like I forgot what it's called.
Jacquard distance.
Yeah, Jacquard distance. So she computed the Jacquard distance between these different ingredients, and then she created this tasting menu. It was actually like a dinner where you could try things that were really similar and really dissimilar. I really like this because this is kind of a good example of what we have in the school, because there's like this whiteboard where you see her, where we're like working stuff out, and I don't know why she wrote Boo Jacquard, but trying to figure out the Jacquard distance, and then a bottle of wine, which I said is important. This is Hiroko Yamane created this emoji programming language, where I like he defines 2π with pizza emoji. Tura Yurikawa is a Japanese artist who created a binary card game. And he just printed these black and white cards, and he didn't make any rules up. And the idea is that he crowdsourced the rules. And so people created different games with this. So he just created this set of cards. And it's actually really amazing. Like the different people created all kinds of games, like strategy games or games to teach binary numbers with this black and white cards.
Same color both sides?
Yeah. This is a project by two artists, Ishak Bertrand and Jonathan Wall, and they created this really beautiful project with two monitors that are facing each other. So it's two screens and then two cameras that are looking, like the camera that's on top of one screen is looking at the screen of the other side. And they programmed a conversation. So they created a very simple graphical language for how two people could talk, and then they had them go back and forth. So what was nice is that they designed actually like a graphical like a whole language about conversation, and then coded that, and then set up these devices to just talk. And it was really fun to watch them kind of go through, like almost perform a conversation, but in this very simple graphical way. This is an artist, Matt Daniels, he was focused on illustration, and he was taking these drawings and then designing kind of generative systems for taking kind of hand drawings and then making them digital in kind of organic way. This is an artist, Cristo Allegra, and he was interested in data visualization using photography. So he took, these are 4 stock prices of 4 different companies, and he he visualized their stock price with using tulips. I like this. This is visualizing Apple's stock prices with Chernoff faces. So he's taking Tim Cook's face and he's adjusting the face over time to show what's happening with the stock. I like this project Andy Clymer created. This is the insecurity camera. So it's a security camera that when you look at it, it looks away. It's really beautiful. So like when you're looking at it, it kind of turns its head to the side. It was really fun. Even just like before it was installed, it was like super fun just kind of watching it. Kind of like be like, no, don't look at me. Another thing that I find really beautiful is that the students who come to our school start their own school. So Paul Chang was one of our students, and he started something in New York, and it's now in Shanghai called OF Course, where he was teaching students creative coding. Rachel Uwa is another student of ours, and she's based in Berlin, and she started this school, which I really love. It's called School of Machines, Making, and Make-Believe. And it's a school very similar to SFBC, but it's in Berlin, and you can go for 4 weeks at a time and study different topics. Some other projects, I don't know what this is. Oleg Peshkovsky created this I don't know what to call this. This is Katie Smiley created poems based on the in America we have this thing called I don't know if you have Craigslist here, but there's this thing called misconnections where you can write if you saw somebody on the subway and you like had a moment but you missed them, and she scoured those to find those that were, or she cuts them and turns them into haiku poems. This is a really a good example of a project, and I'll explain this project and then how it inspired my work. This is an artist named Yuki Yoshida, and he studied. There's a lot of ways to actually draw a circle with code. So when you're telling the computer to draw a circle, there's a lot of different algorithms that you can use. And so you created this book where he showed the code on one side and the circle on the other side. And it's really beautiful because it's all different ways of doing the same thing. And I had this interaction with him where I wrote him and I said, here's an idea. And I described the idea and then I coded it for him. Very simple, which was this, start with a square. And if you pick a random point on one of the 4 edges, and then you connect it to a random point on one of the 3 other edges, and you look at that line, if that line doesn't intersect the circle, you draw the line. But if it does intersect the circle, you don't draw the line. So it's a way of drawing the circle by absence, right? You're drawing it not by drawing the circle itself, but by drawing the area around the circle. So I coded this thing for Yuki just to show him. And then I got so excited about this that it went off in my own direction. So I started to look at typography and putting words in there. I tried a smiley face. That didn't work very well. And then I got really excited about reflection. And I'll show some examples with that, where that sketching inspired me to kind of explore reflection. We're really committed to creating a very open and diverse environment, and so we do a lot of thinking about how we have written about and we talk a lot about how we organize the school and try to create a really safe and enjoyable space. So there are some Medium posts. This is about diversity. We believe in being completely open with our budget. So our budget is actually on GitHub, and you can see. Like, usually when you go to university, you have no idea where your money goes, right? If you go to a school like Parsons, it's really hard to say, like, if I spend whatever, $20,000 or $25,000 a semester, like, where does that go? Who's getting that money? What's that being spent on? But we publish the budget, so you can actually see, like, who's where the money's going to, this much to beer, and this much to people speaking, and this much to teachers, and this much to space. And the majority of our the money actually just goes from people to people. Like we almost wanted to create a school where we like didn't take money from people, but we just had the students pay the teachers directly. But we thought about that, but we didn't go that far. And this is, we don't spend our money on signs, so this is what our front door looks like. This is at our old address. I'll show one project that we did for a festival, and then kind of talk about my own work a bit. This is back to our logo. It's hanging out in the back of the school. Some more photographs of working. I teach this class at the school, which is called Recreating the Past. And in the class, every week I come in and I lecture a bit about a different artist, an artist that inspires me, that I think is really important for understanding computational artistic practice. And so, for example, this is an artist named Vera Molnar. Vera Molnar is a Hungarian artist who's based in France. And she was doing pen plotter drawings in the 70s. So she was writing software to control a pen plotter and doing generative art. It's really phenomenal. I'll show it. Her work's really beautiful. And so we would do things like actually study her, study her work. Like I would talk a bit about the artist, but then as a group, we would all research this artist and try to learn as much as we could about their work. And then the homework assignment every week is for students to take one of the artworks and then recreate them using modern tools. So using processing or openFrameworks or some sort of, however they wanted to recreate them, to recreate that artwork using a modern tool. And we created this installation that I really was excited about. This is for a music festival. And we picked 5 different artists, like Vera Molnar, James and John Whitney, Bridget Riley, Muriel Cooper, and Rosa Mankman. And the students studied their work and recreated them. And we showed, in this installation, we had 2 LED screens, and we showed the code and the visuals side by side. So the idea is that you would see code on the right side and visuals on the left side. And when one number would change in the code, you could see the corresponding change in the visuals. So I told the students that they should bring sunglasses because the LED screen would be really bright, and nobody believed me, but it's really bright. It's not like a projector. Can show you what this looks like. The other thing that we did is we made a zine, like a Xerox zine. And I really like this because it was a music festival, so everybody's there to see. I forgot who played that year. Like, I don't know, Kendrick Lamar was performing, and I think maybe New Order. Some big bands were performing, or like some smaller bands. So everybody's there like drinking and like, I don't know, doing a lot of drugs or whatever, and then they would come to our installation and we would give them this zine. And the idea that I had is that they would come home, maybe they would come home, and after they like wake up with a hangover, they would find this zine in their pocket, and then they would be like, oh, who is Vera Molnar? They would just like look at it and be like, oh, I want to Google that person and find out who they are. Pretty bright. And so the room would actually go dark, like after each sketch, and then you would hear this typing. You would hear like if they thought we were hanging out. They thought it was us typing, and we were too embarrassed to tell them it wasn't us. It would have been like soup. That would have been like Ninja. And the idea is that you would see like, you could see here actually like, oh, sorry. You could see here like when numbers change, like the line of code would light up, and then you would see like some parameter would change, and you could see the corresponding visual change. And so I got really excited about this. Students were so happy making sketches. We had maybe like 50 or 60 different sketches that they had made. And so that was in December, maybe like a year and a half ago. And I decided in January 1st that I would start doing daily sketches, kind of inspired. I saw how excited they were making these sketches, and so I wanted to kind of have that energy. And so I do daily sketches on Instagram. That started in January 1st in 2016. And so I said before, like it started with reflection. And so my first sketch, but way back then, was just a Happy New Year's. So we're always like making kind of Happy New Year messages for each other. And what happened was, I have a stepdaughter. She's 6, now she's 7. But at the time she was 6, and she was having a lot of trouble going to sleep. And so what would happen is I would hang out in her room and read books, and then she didn't want me to leave while she would go, she would be trying to go to sleep. So I would take my laptop and like work on a sketch, and then in the morning I would show her what I made. And at the beginning of the year, she loved everything, and she was like, "This is amazing! Like I'm hypnotized." And but I kept showing her stuff, and then she started to get actually more critical. And so by like February, March, she was like, "Oh, you should add color." It's like a little repetitive. And what I liked is that she was developing this like critical language about art. That I was making these sketches, but then she was really my audience, right? I was posting them, but really sharing it with her and kind of seeing what she was excited about. So it started with reflection, and there's a lot of what's nice is that when you're doing these reflection studies, you're just simulating light, and so you have two choices, which is where is the light and where are the walls, right? Where's the light coming from? What is the light source, and where are the walls? And there's other things like refraction, so the light can hit a wall and bend, and that produces a different kind of look, or a different feeling. This is a mixture of reflection and refraction. But a lot of times it would be basically like, every day just trying to think like, where's the light coming from, where are the walls? And making these kind of daily experiments. I was really, really interested in typography as well. So how could you use type forms? I just kept using the word love a lot. Because love has like curves in it and also straight lines, and so it was just was like an easy word to use.
You mean also real life?
Yeah, in real life as well. Yeah. And that contrast between curve and straight line is something that I experimented a lot about. Some things are really beautiful. Like this is this is like using I don't know how to pause this video. No, sorry. This is using not very many rays of light, but letting them, in very simple geometry, letting the rays bounce for a very long time. So I just say shoot a ray off, and when it hits, keep bouncing, keep bouncing, keep bouncing. And you start to get these interesting patterns that emerge, right, that are just based on kind of the angle of the ray. It's this kind of simple forms, complex forms in a way that come out of these very simple simple setups. I also looked at color, so just having rays of light but coloring them in different ways, or using refraction, so having using typography. Somebody told me this was look like Facebook.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not for Facebook. Sorry, I feel really embarrassed now.
Are these built with openFrameworks?
These these are built, most everything I do in the daily sketches are with openFrameworks. I'll show something that's done in JavaScript in a second. And I also make like interactive versions. So I really like if you have, doing these sketches, but also making like something for the public to interact with. So I created this installation, which is basically a light table, and you can come to and put down, like laser cut these shapes with acrylic, and so you're basically setting up the walls that the light will bounce off of. And what I like about these installations is that they are, they sort of start with the body. Like you just come, you put your hands down, and you see your hands, or you see always starts with the body, but then it goes to your mind and then back to the body. So I really like this journey of ideas from the body to the mind to the body. I think is really interesting, and you can see it happen. And I really like this sort of creating this interactive things. I did a color one where there's different modes for the light. So there's a button you can try different, like you can change the behavior of the light. And in a way, this was like, I felt like people were interacting with my sketchbook. It was really beautiful because for me, these sketches are like diary entries, and then to invite the public to come and kind of jam and see what creativity they bring to it. It's exciting. And doing it outdoor. This is at a light festival in Prague, setting it up outdoors. I showed some like public art and then some more sketches. This is a project that we did in Houston based on masks. So Bruno Minari has this amazing book called Design as Art. And in it, he has this section where he describes how you don't need a lot of information to describe a face, right? That you just need just a few points and you'll see a face. And it's a bit like, I think the word is pareidolia. Are you familiar with this? Pareidolia? Or not spelled? It's the idea that you could, no, it's not.
Pareidolia.
What is it?
Pareidolia.
There it is. The second.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. It's definitely not an insect. All right. But like this, like that you don't need, it's really easy to see faces in things, right? Our brain is really wired to see faces. And so we're inspired by this concept and just mass generally, and the idea of kind of the creativity in mass. Also that like mass are an important part of culture, right? There's a lot there. I think pretty much every culture uses mass in different ways to tell stories and describe what's important to them. And just artists like Erwin Murm does this kind of creative expression, just looking at mass. And we created this interactive installation. This is actually using, somebody asked about openFrameworks. This is using Paper.js, which I really love. It's a JavaScript library for creating graphics, but you're doing it in the browser. And it's similar in a way to Illustrator. It has the same feeling as Illustrator. So if you're used to Illustrator, this is a language or a toolkit to check out. And we created this installation, and this installation works like, it's just 2 monitors in downtown Houston. It's this old building that used to be a department store, but it's now like a parking garage. So it has a beautiful facade, but inside is just automobiles parking there. And we set up 2 big monitors with cameras, and when you come to it, it sees your face, and as soon as it sees your face, it adds a layer of graphics on top of your face, and there's about 50 masks that we created. So when the camera finds you, it kind of zooms in and then shows you your face with graphics on top. So I can show you a little bit. Actually, a video.
So you're looking.
And so this is installed. This is in downtown Houston, and I really like this kind of public art. This face stuff, like now with Snapchat and Facebook, there are a lot of, this is a concept that's not unfamiliar to people, but I think there's something really beautiful about it being not like an effect, but actually like a mask, something that you wear and perform. And so we were getting people on the street to actually like kind of perform and dance and move around, because the masks are responsive. So really like this idea of kind of people jamming and you know, exploring what they could do. It's using face tracking, so there are libraries that you can get that just tell, you know, from a camera image will tell you like the 68 points on your face, and then adding kind of graphical layer on top. And I really like, some of the masks are like really, some are really like playful and kind of, you know, goofy, and some of them are like really complex. Like I really like this one, which is just, it's like, you know, they're, and so I just, with the daily sketches, my stepdaughter was like, you should do color. She gave that for a month. She was like, you should do color, you should do color. No. And then finally I woke up one day, I was like, okay, I'll do color. So I started to do blobs. And I'll kind of go through like just some of the, I won't go through everything because I've been doing it now for like a year and a half, so there's just a lot to talk about. But blobs for me are really interesting. So reflection is just like rays of light and walls, and blobs are just lines that are connected. Right? If you take a set of connected lines and you make a curved shape, that's a blob. And I started to think about how could I illustrate this blob and render it, different like visual qualities. I really love blobs. I'm really obsessed with blobs. A lot of times, like the debug view looks more interesting than the output. So it sort of show what it looks like. Different, you know, accidents. This was an accident. It looked like an ink stroke. Sometimes things happen like this. Looks pretty poor in the projection. Looks, but at regular resolution looks a little bit better. But like this is a sketch that I made that people really loved, and I made it really quickly, just having two blobs on top of each other and connecting them. I think there's something really interesting as an artist when you're working and you're posting things, like I'm posting things every day, and there are things that I love that people don't like as much as I like them. And then there's something that you don't like that much, but people really like it. And you start to think, like, why is that? Like, what's interesting in this idea? So I was thinking about this, and to me it seemed like the negative space, the spaces between the shapes were interesting. So I started to do explorations of that, where most computer graphics are additive, where you just kind of drawing and like drawing on top of drawing on top of drawing, but could you actually draw where you draw, like what you draw reveals the thing below it, as opposed to drawing on top of it. And so doing almost like subtractive graphics versus additive graphics.
Will you save all this sketch? If you make an accident, or someone really like it, or you really like it, will you save it?
I save it, but I'm not really.
You mean you have a more than 1 year sketch, then
I'll show you how I work in this. I can show you how I work. I save the code, but a lot of times I work iteratively. So sometimes I will overwrite things, and I'm not very serious. Like it's not on GitHub. When I do professional work, I work very seriously. But for this kind of work, I work in a very unserious way. So sometimes there's ideas like, I was so excited about this. Calculating where the intersection of shapes is actually really hard. And I think, and people didn't like this, but I loved it. So to me, it's like interesting also, like you have an idea that you're like so excited about and like work really hard on that people don't like as much as you do. There's a lot of things that you can do with blobs. Sometimes doing very graphical things. I tried to figure out how to put an image on a blob. And so just like take this blob shape but map a texture to it. As soon as I could do that, I did this. This freaked my stepdaughter out. Totally hated it. I loved it.
While I was sleeping.
I loved it. She hated it. I did things like layering, and so I was excited about having blobs like on top of blobs, and got really interested in offsets. So there's this whole genre, like on Instagram, of people where they take paint and they pour like one color and they pour another color, they pour another color. So I love the way that looks, like having one shape inside of another. So I started to just think about how you could have like offsets, like have a shape and then have offsets. It's actually a really hard geometry problem. Right? It's a really complicated problem to take like a shape, like a circle is easy, but like other shapes that are convex, concave. This is an example from like the Olympics signage from 1968 in Mexico. Also just has this beautiful offsets. So I got obsessed with offsets, and I did a lot of experiments. The first ones were terrible. They were like trying to do offsets, and it's like a lot of times the code looks really bad. And then a little bit better, so you can still see it's a little shaky. But really thinking about like how could I offset? How could you take one curve and like make it larger and sort of grow it out? And sometimes what's interesting is you work on these things, and to me this graphically feels like 1970s or something. Like it feels like a 1970s illustration. I feel like I'm like recreating the past kind of through making these algorithms. More offsets, lots of offsets. And sometimes you discover like this is just offsets with a little bit of noise, and it starts to look very hand-drawn, more like, I don't know, gritty. Sometimes I'm like in a really chill mood. I want to just show how chill I am. Sometimes I'm not chill. This is an example of one that, and this projector is really low res, so it's really, but that's okay. but this is one that's like almost impossible to compress. Like there are certain things that you can't share on Instagram because you just can't compress them. I could talk for an hour about compressing video. Back to chill again. So like it's really like a diary in a way. I got obsessed with the alphabet. So the alphabet is kind of like a blob, and that's this closed shape. And I started to think about how could I animate it. And so I took like letters of the alphabet and tried to figure out how you could like, I don't know, like I really wanted the blob to turn into letters of the alphabet. And like this is the first example. It's actually like super, like when it was, this is almost working. So like A, B, C, I think I tell it to be the letter C. There's this moment where it messes up. G, A, oh yeah. I'm like F, G, and then like there's certain letters where it's like, I don't know what to do. Totally lost. And then I don't know what to do. Like I like made it, but I don't really know what to do with it. So it's messing around. You have letters bounce off of letters. And so this is actually interesting. Like to me, this looks like
soup alphabet.
Yeah, it's like those posters from the 60s, those from San Francisco, those like, I don't know, you would see like Jefferson Airplane or something.
It's kind of like lava lamp.
Yeah, feels like a lava lamp. So as soon as I have it like, as something that can move, then I think could I interact with it? So I'm like pushing around the letter 3 with my mouse, and then if it works with the mouse, then I can get it to work with the webcam. And what's nice is that it's like, it really feels like there's physically something there. It's just a piece of black paper, and I'm looking at the computer screen. But it really felt like I was touching something. Like I was playing with it, and there was nothing there, but I felt like I was touching something real. Got obsessed with simple geometry. So you only need, for example, like 3 points to define a circle. So if you have 3 points, just like 1, 2, 3, that there's an equation that will tell you the circle that goes between them. But if those points are in a line, then the circle has an infinite size. The radius of the circle is infinite. And so there's something really beautiful about this motion where as those points become a line, the circle grows and then it shrinks again. So I started to explore that, and a lot of times the sketches will start with a very simple idea, and then I like push it, and then try to say like, what would happen if I had lots of these points, and they go in sync and out of sync, or I tried like adding more, and here's like you can get motion capture data, so like a walk cycle, somebody walking, and then I tried putting circles through them. I got really obsessed with this Armin Hoffman. This has this very simple kind of graphical language for generating shapes, where you start with circles and then you generate, like you put lines between them, almost like a rubber band, and then you can generate shapes. So I did a lot of experiments with circles, so similar to the blobs, but these are just circles that are connected to each other, and then I just trace them. Like I go on the outside of one circle and the inside of the other. And this produces like very different shapes. Like the the form, it's not like the previous blobs. It's like more circular in a way. So I started to do experiments with rendering those, and this projector is a nightmare for this artwork.
Like Instagram.
So you live it like Instagram. But go check this out.
The worst.
Yeah, it looks better. Really interested in the body. I'll go quickly. I realized talking for a long time. Really interested in the body. Like these are Oscar Schlemmer, like Dadaist costumes. Really like obsessed with this. Like go to YouTube if you're not familiar with this work. These are like fucking amazing. Like these ballets that he created and these costumes that he created are just so beautiful. Also, if you go to Giphy, you can find little clips of these. These are awesome for email. Like they're like, it's like way better than using like Adventure Time GIF. Like Oscar Schlemmer GIF is like really high quality GIF game. Or Louise Bourgeois, like these beautiful sculptures that are about like transforming the body. And so I did a lot of sketches where I have this video clip of just somebody moving, and I use the same video clip over and over again. And then I started to explore like what's happening with that body, and how could I like take the lines of that body and manipulate it in some way. So using the movement of that form, and then writing some software to like extrude it or revolve it, or like doing things like finding the inner offsets and then rotating them, so you get this thing that it's like it is based on the body, but it's also taking the body as a starting point and then trying to transform it into some other thing. A lot of stuff like attaching shapes to the body, so creating more like kind of costumes. Yeah, these are like blobs, blobs that are connected to the body. This is interesting. I'll explain what I'm doing. If you take the outline of the shape and you just throw like horizontal lines across, and you look at the intersection, there's always going to be an even number of intersections. It could be like 2 intersections if it's just the middle of your body, or if it's like your hand and then your body and then your hand again, or your arm and then your body and then your arm. That's 6 intersections. There's always going to be an even number of intersections. So if you take those intersections and you just like connect them with a circle, you get this weird shape. So it's like a body that's created out of circles. So it kind of looks like a body, but then you can do things like, I don't know, it becomes more sculptural in a way. Popcorn person. This was really popular with my 7-year-old. This is finding circles. So I'm trying to fit circles on the body and say like what on the body looks like a circle, and then draw circles there. This is using an image of the body on the body. So taking the image that this video is based on and cutting it into pieces, and then if you change how zoomed in you are, you can get different effects. Just drawing stuff. I'll explain kind of how this stuff is used to make art. This is a project that I did for a London Literature Festival, where I collaborated with Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood is like probably she's one of the most famous living, she's Canadian, but English authors. And she had a new book coming out in the fall that's based on The Tempest. And the publishing company reached out to me and said, could we create an interactive installation for this book for the London Literature Festival? And so I sent a proposal, and working with Margaret Atwood is a bit like working with Beyonce. So I couldn't talk to her directly. So I would send a proposal to the publishing agency that would send it to her editor, who would send it to her agent, who would send it to her assistant, and then Margaret would be like, that's great. And so I only met her at the event, but she's fucking awesome. So we created this installation where you approach it, and then it takes the text from the book, and it uses your body. So it's just using a connect, but it takes the language from the book. There's 3 different scenes, and we took the text from that section of the book and added it to this installation. So you're seeing yourself. And the book is actually really, it's based on The Tempest. It's quite sad in a way, but it's also a lot of it's whimsical in a way too. So we here, this is one of the things which is about feeling like alone or feeling like you're an island. So showing you yourself, but surrounded by text, or like plotting revenge, and so. But some of it's also really playful. So I love this kind of thing of like using language, but then kind of using language as a starting point, but creating an interactive installation. This was the night before I was setting up, and this guy just came over and started trying it, and I really wanted to finish setting up, but we were so excited. Here she is. She's awesome. She's like in her 70s. She was really good at using it. She told me that if Shakespeare was alive today, he would be using a Connect. Great. The other thing that was amazing is that it only works with one person at a time. So in order for multiple people to be using it, they actually need to hold hands. And the book is all about kind of being alone, right? Being kind of like being cast away from society and then plotting your revenge and coming back. And so it actually forced people to hold hands. And that's something I really found very... they contacted me in August. They were like, could you do this project? I went on vacation. I put the book on my Kindle. I was like on the beach reading this super sad book. And for me, it was like, how do you combat that in a way? And it was very beautiful to watch people actually come together and have this very physical relationship, when they're using it. I'll show a few more projects that come out of sketching, and then happy to answer questions. This is a project that I did in November in Japan with my friends. It's Daito Manabe. I showed the face projection thing before. He has a company there called Rhizomatics, and we did a project for Volvo. Volvo has this spray paint, which is called Life Paint. So this is retro-reflective spray paint. And the idea is that you'd be like biking, and you could like spray paint your bike or spray paint your clothing. And then this is retro-reflective. So what it means is when the light hits it, it bounces back like coincident with the light, like very directly bounces it back.
What's the retro part?
I don't know. It's just like if you have running shoes, sometimes you have like certain like high visibility equipment. It's usually like material that has a lot of little glass beads in it, I think. And so what happens if there's a really bright light, like a headlight of a car, the light bounces back at a very narrow angle.
Right.
So, and so what we did is we created a costume where we spray painted lines on these shirts that we bought, and then wrote software to track these musicians on stage. And so we had this kind of skeleton that came out of this costume from this paint, and then kind of created visuals based on that. Did a live performance. I don't have a video edit. These are just some Instagram rips. So it's a little rough, but this is a live performance with 2 DJs.
So the audience won't see the light reflection.
The audience doesn't see it. The camera is seeing it. Yeah. Yeah, we used the infrared camera. And then there was a moment where we had also a color camera that was calibrated with it, so we could kind of crossfade and show. The thing about it, though, is so I really love Daito, but the DJs are really boring the way they move. So they're basically like adjusting a knob and then move, and adjust a knob and then move. And it's actually like, I would like to work with dancers next time. The most interesting thing is that Daito kept dropping a piece of equipment. Like something kept falling on the floor, and so he would like lean over and everything, and it would like he'd come back up, and everything looked super interesting when he did that. But, for the most part, they're like, they're just doing this. I actually think there's a lot of stuff I could. I'm gonna. Sorry. This is projector so low resolution. Can't believe it.
It was cheap, okay?
No, it's not. I think there's a lot of interesting things. I have to go back in time. you can see these are all 2017 sketches. I'm actually really interested in kind of body movement, and there's some now with some machine learning. I'm not really into machine learning. Like a lot of my friends are doing like obsessed with machine learning, doing a lot of machine learning projects. But there are some really beautiful things that are coming out of the machine learning community. So there's now ways to like track like from video to get skeletons. So similar to how like using a Kinect you would get a skeleton, there's now ways where you can take a video file or even live video if you have a big, like you'd need a pretty big graphics card, where you can get a skeleton. And I think there's really beautiful things that you can do. So this is with like Fred and Ginger. You know, is there like these dances are so beautiful, like the movement's really beautiful, and then to be able to take it and kind of analyze it and be able to explore. This is my friend Daito works a lot with with this dance company, and so just kind of like using some video from some test footage from them and kind of trying to add a graphical layer on top. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with people that move it more better than a DJ, because the DJ's pretty boring. The last thing that I'll say, so the daily sketching was inspired by my students at SFBC, because they were so excited about sketching that I got excited about it. The other thing is that I was thinking a lot about school, and when the school is not in session, I realized that I was actually getting depressed when I wasn't teaching, because I missed actually interacting with students and interacting with people. And so I started to do this thing called open office hours. This also started like in 2016, kind of New Year's resolution with the daily sketching. I do this thing where once a week I make myself available. So you do it usually on Twitter, where I say like, tomorrow I'll be available from 10 to 1. And anybody can come and talk to me, and I'll meet in person, but also on Skype or Hangouts. And I just try to make myself available once a week. Sometimes when I'm traveling, it's hard. It's not always once a week, but typically. So the first time I said I'm going to do open office hours, my friend responded back with this kind of rip from Peanuts. So I like this image. The basic idea is that I spend 3 hours. Sometimes I would talk to one person, usually talk to somebody for 20 or 30 minutes. And the same way like a professor has open office hours. They have some time when they say, just come and talk to me. I try to do that once a week and just make myself available to talk to people. And so, for example, this is an artist. I was in London setting up that project with Margaret Atwood, and this is a artist who came and talked to me and showing me her work. And sometimes people are asking me for advice, like I'm writing an artist statement, or I'm working on my portfolio, or like I need to get a job, or should I go to this school or that school? And sometimes it's just to talk, or it's just, I don't know, the conversations are all really different. And yeah, for me it's super exciting. I really like making myself available. It's also kind of selfish. So it sounds like I'm doing a really good thing for people, but actually I don't, people email me and I basically say, come and talk to me in my open office hours. So I don't answer questions unless it's a friend or a client, or my wife, or, so I try to not talk to people during the week. So I actually think it's great, like if you make yourself available, because I found it was actually hard that people would be like, I'm visiting New York, could we get coffee? Or like, I have a question, and then you email people like, let's have coffee at 3, no, 4 o'clock, no, I'm running late. Like all of this like conversation about conversation was driving me crazy. So it's actually really great to say like, I'm not going to answer any questions. I mean, people on Instagram will sometimes ask me questions. I will answer them if I can do it quickly. But if it's more complicated, I would say come and talk to me during open office hours. So I just find it really, in that part I find really beautiful. And the last thing I want to share with you, this is River, who's my stepdaughter, she created this book called I Am Art. I have to find it. I don't even know how to get. No, I can't even find. Oh my God, where is the? All right, I'm gonna read you this book. View full screen. I really like this book that she made when she was 6 years old. It's called I Am Art by River the Artist. This book is for a Po and a Gon and Nana. Art is like you feel free. You feel like you can do anything, and you know what to draw. And if you don't, you look at you. You are the one, and you have your own imagination. And maybe in your imagination, you will see lines and squares. This took me a long time to figure out. Squares. Yeah. And in those squares and lines, you will see art. And that art is amazing, and you are too. Haha. Stop looking at me. Art. I am art. Food is art. Anything is art. Art. All right. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
You mentioned that you were could show us a little bit on how you made the sketches.
Yeah, so I basically, it's like hard for me to operate my computer at this resolution, but I can show you the process is pretty straightforward. I code them in, I'll show you, yeah, it's like this. Maybe, let me actually change the resolution. I just can't see.
You can in the system setting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scale.
Yes.
It basically looks the same. It's just, yeah. Okay. You can't read the code. Okay. So I'll run this sketch. This is like, I think I made this yesterday. This is one of the, yeah, so usually, this looks pretty shitty, but use your imagination. So usually like code a sketch, and sometimes I'm really lazy. I don't use a GUI. I usually hook stuff up to the mouse, try to find something that I like. So as soon as I find it, like I get it, working the way I like, sorry, I quit it by accident. I will, so let's say I have it, I'm like, that position looks good. I'll open up QuickTime, and there's a Medium post. I wrote down these instructions, and I wrote, oh sorry, there's a lot of shit in QuickTime. Sorry. I guess sometimes when you quit QuickTime, it has like movies that you saved. Okay. All right, so QuickTime has a screen recorder, so I will do like, I will try to make it square as best I can, make like a square recording, like record it, etc. Then you can trim it in QuickTime, like you can trim the clip, save it, and then there's a command line tool called Ffmpeg, which is for it's like a Swiss Army knife.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's a Swiss Army knife for video. So a lot of the tools that you use, like graphical tools, will use Ffmpeg in the background. And this is like a line that compresses it. And basically what I'm doing when I do the compression, I try to, Instagram is really specific about bitrate. And so I just try to like get the right bitrate. And so this is a compression factor. And usually I've done this now so many times that I can guess the number pretty well. But I usually do it, and if it's like bitrate is too high, make this number bigger. Bitrate is too low, make this number smaller. Then that video I airdrop to my phone, and then I share it from there. And then everything goes in this folder called Everyday, which I pulled the screenshots out because I was organizing stuff for, oh no, it looks like I have screenshots in here. These are screenshots from recently. I pulled out my screenshots because I'm in the process of organizing things. But this is everything I do from January 1st, 2016 to yesterday, I haven't done one today yet, goes in here. So all of the screenshots and video recordings, and it's just one folder. It now is like 200 gigabytes, so I have to figure out what to do. But basically, everything goes in here, and so sometimes I will, like, things that I don't post will go in here, screenshots. I had really weird experiments. Yeah, I don't know. I went through like an eye phase last week. So. But pretty much, like, I think that's really important. Like that, I don't think about it too much, but just have a way for like everything you do to go in one place. Because in a way, it's like a diary. So then I find, like, even though I don't necessarily, I try to save the code as much as possible. But even though I don't have the code, that sometimes these are like breadcrumbs, and I can find my way back because I can see the work is iterative. I'm going backwards now in time, but the work, like, things you do one day is what you change the next day, and so it's easy to kind of retrace your steps. But yeah, I'm not very serious about archiving. But I do try to actually archive this, so that this output, like everything that you make, gets saved, and I back this up, and because I think this is really important, like the high resolution version of the movies, the screenshots, etc. Other questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how much time do you spend on a sketch, usually?
Usually like half an hour, sometimes an hour. But a lot of times what will happen is that I'll do more than one sketch a day. So I'll work on something, and I'll do it, and then I'll be like, oh, it almost becomes, how do I explain this? It's a way for me to procrastinate the commercial work that I have to do. So a lot of times I'll be like working on a client job or something, and then I'll be like, oh, I could do this thing that I did this morning, I could do better, and I'll come back to it, and those will be really fast. Like sometimes the first sketches will take a while because I'll solve a problem. A lot of these are visual changes to the same underlying algorithm. So for example, this is just a subdivision algorithm, right? Taking like a webcam and looking at color similarity and dividing squares, based on color similarity. But all of these are the same algorithm, but drawn different ways. So those are actually really fast to do, because you sort of have solved the hard problem once, and then you just say, like, what if I did circles? What if I did lines? What if I did ovals? And that's, those are easy. Those could be 5 minutes, But sometimes there's hard problems that just take hours. But typically, like, I'd say on average, like half an hour to an hour. And I used to do it at night because River was having trouble sleeping. Now I do it in the morning. But when I'm traveling, I do it when I can. So, but I'm also not. Some people are really crazy, like they have to post every day. But I don't feel that like compelled. I try to post every day, but sometimes, like, there are times I went camping. My wife was like, "I'll kill you if you bring your laptop over the fucking internet." So I was like, "That's great. That's like 3 or 4 days I'll be offline." And and sometimes I'm like totally uninspired, and that's fine as well. Like, I will find that sometimes I hit a wall and I need to take a day, and just like change direction. A lot of these things, to me, it feels like sketching is like moving around in the dark. Like when you're doing client work or design work, it feels like you're working in daylight, right? You know where you need to go. But a lot of these feel like I'm like walking around dark alleys, and I'm like, I have no idea. I hit a dead end, I like turn back, I go down some other dark alley, but I don't really know where I'm going. So, other questions?
Do you work with 3D? I've seen these things.
Yeah, I do a lot of kind of. I'm interested in 3D, but I do a lot of stuff that's like kind of pseudo 3D. Like I try to do 2D things that look 3D, or 3D things that look 2D. I do a lot of stuff with isometric, where you're sort of not using perspective. You're using 3D, but you're trying to keep things as flat as possible. So there's on Instagram in particular, there's great artists doing 3D rendering. Like there's a whole genre of artwork on Instagram that I love. That's like actual 3D software. But I'm so lazy to the idea that you would have to render something overnight, that you would have to like wait to see it, I can't. I'm like usually can't wait. Like it's really. I don't. For me, I really like to just see the art that I'm making right away. I understand there's a lot of visual quality that you could do with 3D software that you can't do with this kind of graphics. So, yeah, maybe that's a downside. But I do work in 3D. Like I think 3D is important. So I do stuff like, let's go back in time. With the blobs, for example. Let's see what was going on. Yeah. Like I took the blobs and I made them 3D, made 3D versions of the blobs. So I think this point I was like slicing them, but let's go back and move further. Yeah, like take the same kind of physics and then like actually make make 3D forms. So yeah, I think there's stuff like I do 3D, but I kind of like really sometimes there's random shit. You know what that is? Yeah. But I kind of like, yeah, I think personally I really like flat stuff. So I do these 3D forms, but I was doing 3D shapes, and then you can see I started to slice them, and I was like, how do I make it 2D again? Like I feel more comfortable, I started with 3D, but then I was like, could I actually make it 2D, like by slicing it? And part of it, I think there's some interesting tensions between 3D and 2D. There's also a lot of stuff that I don't know how to do very well in openFrameworks, like things like shadows that I think help, certain lighting and shadows make 3D graphics really approachable that are harder to do in OpenGL. So I think part of it is like my lack of understanding of how to do those things well. Yeah. Other questions?
Working with people, and working with students particularly, which is harder, working with someone who has the technical know-how but like struggles the creative side, or has the creative side but is struggling with the technical know-how? Or do you see just everyone struggles with everything and you work together?
Yeah, I don't think one is harder than the other. I think with technical students that come in, like we'll have students at SFBC or Parsons that have a CS background, and part of it is helping them feel like a beginner again. And so sometimes some of the things that I love at SFBC, you work with different languages. Like I'll teach OF, but there'll be a class where you learn functional programming, and then people will like maybe not have studied those things. And I think that idea of like trying to give somebody a pair of new eyes to the technology is interesting, and then introducing them to art and trying to help them have, helping them develop their vocabulary to talk about art, what moves them, like a critical language about art. And then for folks that are coming from an artistic side, it's like, how do you create the right learning path so that they can get the technical skills to be able to make their ideas visible, like bring their ideas into the world. And it's hard. I mean, I think learning to code is more like learning the guitar than learning the piano. Like piano is, I think the path of learning the piano is like, it's pretty easy, and then it gets hard. Like it's like a curve that's like easy. Like you can, as a baby, you can be like, play on the piano, and you can learn how to play a chord, and like you can learn these basic things, and then it goes like this. But guitar is more like, physically hurts when the first week that you learn a guitar, like you're getting calluses on your hands. It hurts, it's painful. And so the curve is different. And I think the curve of learning programming is like that. Like you're forgetting semicolons and things aren't working like as a beginner. So I think part of the interesting challenge there is to try to help people understand that curve and to get like the right pathway to them being able to build their ideas. Other questions?
What do you think is the hardest part about starting a school?
I think the hardest part about starting a school is probably the hardest part about starting anything, which is making it sustainable. So a lot of times at the beginning, when you create a project, there's a lot of like goodwill and good energy, and people are kind of I guess the term is emotional labor. Like people are are like volunteering their time, and you know, it's like exciting, but it actually is a job. It takes time. And how do you create an economic model that is sustainable so that you can pay people for the things that they do and create a kind of like a sustainable ecosystem? And that's the same thing for anything, like openFrameworks, which is an open source tool that I helped create and work on. Like I think one of the challenges is that when we started it, we had no idea, we weren't thinking about a sustainable model. And I think the challenge in creating anything that you want to live for a long time is to make it sustainable so that people, you know, get, like people who donate their, or who are a part of it, get value from it, and you know, and it can keep going. And so in our case, it has been trying to figure out kind of the economic model and the model of responsibility. The other thing that I have found really challenging is that when I was at Parsons, I was an adjunct for a long time, and I was like, adjunct's amazing because you just come and teach. You don't have to go to any meetings, just teach, and it's just, I loved it. But the students, sometimes the students would complain, and I'd be like, yeah, like, you know, fuck the administration. Like, I was on the student side. But it actually is really hard now at SFPC when students complain, like, I am the administration. And so I think part of it is actually figuring out, like, how do you deal with unhappiness, and how do you deal with conflict? And that's something that, you know, especially you're creating, like, school is a social environment, right? And so for the most part, we've been pretty lucky in attracting, like, you know, people who are work openly and are friendly and supportive of each other. But obviously you have people coming together for a short time, and how do you manage, you know, a group of people and create a really safe environment? One thing that had been really helpful at SFPC is that we do a code of conduct at the beginning of the term, and we let the students dictate. We invite the students to create the code of conduct so that they actually spell out in very idealistic language how they want to talk to each other. And then later, when something, if, you know, things invariably go wrong, we can go back to that and say, hey, you know, like in a very polite way, this thing that you did is violating this thing that we talked about. You know, could we talk about that and try to fix problems that happen?
So how do you keep a sustainable model for an open source project?
Yeah, I think processing is a really good example of that right now, because they've created a foundation. So they have a nonprofit, and they now have a mechanism by which people who use processing can give money, right? If you can become a member. It's like a membership model. And I think the nonprofit is a really good thing to work towards, because people can donate money, you can get grants that way, but also like a membership model where companies that are using the tool can give back. So for example, openFrameworks, there are companies that do big projects with openFrameworks, and even if they gave like 1% of their budget or 5% of their budget to the tool, that would be really helpful. But we haven't built the mechanism for that yet. I think processing is a good example because they're building that mechanism, and it's something to learn from. Like, I think that's, you know, it's tricky when money is involved. In open source, it can be really tricky. So if you look at Arduino, I mean, there's been so much drama with Arduino about money, but you know, there's tricky things that can happen. But I think people, yeah, you have to, when you design these things, you have to think about sustainability, and especially finding a way to compensate people for their time.
What about Raspberry Pi Foundation? Is a similar?
Oh yeah, similar thing. I don't know how they're structured or how they work, but yeah, I feel like it's something similar.
Question from
Yeah.
question from internet. Just
okay.
I have a question. So she's asking, to what extent, scope, and depth and age shall we introduce or even teach coding to children?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so I am actually like not like there's this whole like energy around teaching code that is I find a little weird. Like there's some things like I'm really afraid of in America. It's the Silicon Valley feeling of like, code can change the world, and, like we can change the world. And I think that thing is something to be a little bit afraid of. But I think that it's actually really beautiful. There's beautiful things, especially for example in, look at this. What is that doing? There's beautiful things in terms of like making math visible and helping students have like a creative relationship with these tools around them. I don't know the right age, but I am excited about things like Scratch and like code being used in the classroom. And I know for me personally, like I loved as a student, we had Apple II computers, and I played, we were able to play like educational games, with the computer. But actually it was that experience that I didn't get at home. My parents were not like, introducing a computer to me, but to actually be like, here's some kind of device and you can use it in this creative way. And I remember learning Logo, like, but way back in the day, and like telling the turtle to move. And like, I think that had a profound impact on me later in life. More than learning code, I actually think like introduction to the art, like for me, having a introduction to the arts, that was really important at a young age. So my parents taking me to the museums and kind of feeling like art is an important part of your the life as a child. And I know, for example, I saw this television show when I was a kid about it was about cars, people that hacked cars and made art with them. So there was this one that was this VW Beetle that somebody had put light bulbs all over. And they drove around and they could put graphics on the car. It was a very low resolution display, but it was this VW Beetle in the 80s that they were driving around, and like the thing would light up. I think it's Eric. Let me see if I can find this. Eric. Oh yeah, Eric Stoller, VW Beetle. This thing, I saw this as a kid on television, and this like blew my mind. Like this was unbelievable. It was impossible to imagine how this was made. And I think that kind of thing, introducing children at a young age to like magical things, that can have a profound impact and shape their dreams. Like that can, But code, things like Scratch are really beautiful. And then I think things like Little Bits and Arduino in particular, like I love going to Maker Faire and seeing like really young kids hacking and making things.
Have you heard of Turtle Art?
No.
TurtleArt.org.
Turtle.
Give this to your stepmother.
Yeah.
Comes from Brian Silverman, who also was one of the coders behind Scratch and
Uh-huh.
the worlds. A lot of the logo-based programming languages you did. It's drag and drop programming. I teach it. I've taught it for years now, and I get to teach it every single day. It's great.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's beautiful. It's just drag and drop block-based coding. You talked about mathematical kids playing with math and seeing math and playing with it. I think this is one of the things that I joked with our administration and some of our third grade teachers. I said I could probably teach your entire third and fourth grade math curriculum with this one tool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for the recommendation.
You'll have to request the software. It is free. It's also available on the iPad.
Okay. Cool. That's awesome.
Free as open source?
Well, this is a free. You email Brian Artis. Do you know Dr. Seymour Papert?
Yeah.
Seymour Papert's daughter is also on it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
So, but this is a free download that you download it, run it. His support is installed again, and then the app on iPad is a purchase.
Nice.
But it's worth every penny.
I'm really excited. I haven't spent time with Glitch yet, but I'm excited. This is like, some of my friends are really into this. But this is a super open community for making things with code and sharing code. And I think the energy around these communities like really seems really positive. So I think that's an important thing. Like finding the tools are based. I think the tools they're like almost like campgrounds, and then the community comes, and if they're constructed well, the community operates well, and then they're like really welcoming places to learn and share things. So, that's awesome. Cool. Other questions that people have? In the back.
Yeah. So, going back to what you were saying about the Silicon Valley spirit,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people saying like universities are obsolete and all you need to know is like, I don't know, to know how to code whatever and then go to the industry
Yeah.
and like get Peter Thiel giving you money if you drop off.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what your feeling is. I've been teaching at the university level for like 15, 16 years, so I'm biased. But then I see like your SFPC or SPFC,
Yeah.
and these kind of like short schools somehow support that narrative of, okay, all you need to get is get some inertia and then you're gonna be happy and successful.
I don't. Yeah, I actually think like we're not. I can see why you would say that. I don't feel. I feel like we don't feel that way. Like school is really important, and I think it's especially important to have like a liberal arts education where you are taking not just classes in the concentration. Like let's say you're studying, I don't know, biology, but you're also taking literature classes and art classes and classes in the humanities and social sciences, that you have like you're taking in classes in topics that you may not be interested in, but that will like open up doors for you. Like I think that's important. I think that's crucial. So I don't think of us as a replacement for, but more of an add-on to traditional education. So we have students that come like maybe between undergraduate and graduate school, or maybe in place of a 2-year graduate program, they might come to SFBC, get a feeling for the medium, and then say, hey, I want to do this more seriously, and I'm going to go do an internship, or I'm going to go do, a 2-year program. They might use it as a testing ground, or they've have been out of school for years and they want to come back and get have a safe space. But I would never say like you don't need school, and I think that idea is really idiotic. The idea of paying people to drop out, and this idea of I think it produces abnormal people. And I mean, there are people who drop out for a reason, right? And I went to college for a year and I didn't like it, and I went and did. In America, you can do volunteer for a year, right? You can do it's like being in the army. But I went to a really expensive private college and I hated it. Everybody wanted to. All they did is smoke weed and listen to Fish and play hacky sack and stuff. And like nobody was real. And I'm I could play hacky sack, but I hated it and I dropped out. I took a year off and I went and did volunteer service in another city, and it's called AmeriCorps, but it's like being in the army. And that experience was really profound for me, which is like I wasn't sure what I wanted to study, but then I was able to go somewhere, be actually with people that were really different than me, and to be when you do it's like being in the army where you're actually like face to face with people from all walks of life. And so we were doing this volunteer service. We had to wear a uniform, had to do jumping jacks in the morning, and I was taking my parents were really worried that I would not go back to college, so I was taking night classes at this it's like a community college in Rhode Island. And what I discovered is that at night school, people really want to be there, right? They're like people who are working during the day, they want to be at college. It was the exact opposite of my experience at this very fancy school. And I loved that. So I went to Hunter College, which is a city university in New York, and I kind of fell in love with this world of kind of night school and city colleges. And so I found my way. But I think having that experience of maybe not that school wasn't right for me, but that I could actually take time out to figure out what is right. And that at SFBC we try to create a space where people can have that time and space to find out if this is something that they like, or to develop their interests, and kind of have something halfway between a school and a residency, so that it feels like you have this space to develop your own work, your own voice, but also learn things.
Thanks very much for your presentation, and the school behind it is really interesting and exciting. I just have a question about the culture of the school itself.
Yeah.
Just looking at the students and the student work and stuff, there's a lot of women graduates and a lot of women inspiration. I teach sculpture and I teach play in a gaming course. We have a bit of a troubling bro culture. Just a whole lot of dudes come through wanting to make first-person shooters as programs.
Yeah.
And then I get them and I'm trying to teach them sculpture and play, and it's hard.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, just, it could be what you've curated here, or I get the sense that you've, I don't know if you've made a whole lot of deliberate decisions, or you have curated your student or your work or your inspirations in a particular way, but the result that you've shown here is really encouraging. I'm just wondering how you've arrived at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I think it's, especially when it comes to things that are like code and like teaching programs around code and computation, like tend to have gender imbalances. Like CS degree has there's a lot of gender imbalances, and for us, it's I think it was important from the beginning to have to try to prevent that and to try to do that, like in terms of our admissions, to have a process. We have like, we think a lot about the language that we use in our call. We think a lot about, we don't have a huge, we're really poor. Like, we're not a very fancy organization, but we do have scholarships. We do think about ways of using money to help people, because it does, it takes, it's not always easy to pay for the tuition. So that's an important thing for us, and I think, I think we have a long way to go. In my ideal world, it would be free. Like I think it's free is hard, because free, I think it would cost something, but I would love it to cost like a quarter or a fifth or a tenth of what it costs now. Something nominal, so that you don't, if it's free, people then it's really easy to walk away. So I feel like paying something is helpful, because it feels like you have a seat at the table. But I don't think it's affordable yet, and it is affordable. Like, we charge about $5,000 for a 10-week program, which relative to a private university in America, which might be $25,000 for a 15-week semester, like it's quite cheap, but it's expensive to live in New York, and it's expensive relative to schools in Europe. And but I think part of it is the language around the call, how you promote the work of the school. We wrote an article on Medium about diversity and our approach to that, and maybe there's some ideas in there that might be helpful. And it's not always easy, and I think it's important. I think it's a lot of it has to do with curation and whose voices, who's
do you amplify?
And to try to create a really inclusive environment.
Sure.
Yeah. Other questions?
With giving away so much of your work for free, effectively via Instagram, how has it had an effect on your commercial work?
It's interesting, actually. I'm starting to get a lot of jobs like actually illustration work, which I never really thought about as a way of making money. So I actually love it. Like, I'm getting work. Can show you an example of something that I did. Actually, the thing for Shanghai is almost like an illustration job that came out of Instagram sketching. This is something that I did for Adidas, and I feel really like I feel a little nervous about this kind of thing, because it's a bit like these are just some experiment. Adidas came to me and they said, we're going to give you a photograph, and could you make animation, 15-second animation with it? And I didn't know what to do, so I started sketching, and they wanted me to like, I had to do this social media campaign where I had to like actually say the product and use this very specific language, and I'm so nervous about this because I feel really fucking weird doing that. But at the same time, they like basically were like, they didn't art direct me. They were like, we're gonna give you this photograph, like do whatever you want. And I wasn't sure like how weird it could be. Like, I really want to do this. Like, you know, I don't want it to look like a fucking shoe. In the end, I took this one. This is a little bit small. The close-ups are a little easier. But I took this photograph and I was like, how do I make this photo 3D? Like this flat photo, which is of a 3D thing. How do I make it 3D again? And I just experimented with that and like was like, okay, I don't, you know, it's a shoe, but I want to do something cool. But this kind of work comes out of sketching. So getting kind of illustration work or work where it's somewhat commercial related. I love this. This guy is a musician that I really like. Yeah, that was a good reminder. So I think you have to be careful, but yeah, commercial work comes out of it. And for example, I'm gonna go like this thing in Shanghai that I'm working on is like an illustration job. So we went and shot some short clips. I'm gonna do some animation based on things that I saw in the city. I'm gonna go to Facebook next week. So I'm gonna be in Silicon Valley culture, like directly, like in there for a week, and work on. They have these masks, like the Snapchat type masks, and I'm gonna develop masks. And it's like annoying in some way to work at this big company, but in the other way, it's like it's really nice that they actually want to bring artists to the table. I work a lot with Google, like this project. I did this thing with Google with the data arts team, and they gave me a bunch of images from like satellite images, and I made a tool where you could make a drawing, and then it will find the thing that you drew in the satellite images. And like I love this kind of stuff. So sometimes you get to work with companies, and the Instagram work has been really good for that. So I found, I like this kind of thing. So it was a question in the back.
Yeah. So I'm a fashion photographer, and I'm just really curious if you know of anyone like applying computational art with fashion photography, or using it in the fashion industry specifically.
That's an interesting question. I will have to think about. There's a lot of beautiful computational photography things that people are doing. Like, how do I find this? Pop tech photography. Oh, there's Chris Jordan. That's not right. Okay, let's search for pop tech photography.
Chris Jordan.
Oh God, I don't know if it's Chris. I don't. But I'm thinking of this guy from Berlin with long hair. He's a photographer. Yeah. Do you know who I'm talking about?
The fulgurator.
Oh, no, that's another. Yeah.
No, it's photography.
Yeah. Something else. Oh God.
Berlin.
When was I there? 2015. Oh God. This is gonna be so boring to watch me search for this. Pop tech, photo train. Adam Magyar. Okay, perfect. Sorry. All right. Woo. Okay, Adam Magyar. This is an artist who he's done a lot of computational photography stuff. So he does things with like slit scan cameras, and then he will take images. Like he took an image of this train in Berlin using a slit scan camera, and then so this is a camera that only has a line of pixels. Usually with cameras you have like a grid of pixels, but these are they're called maybe line array cameras. They're used for like, I don't know, you have a conveyor belt or something. Like they're used for machine vision, but they're usually really high resolution. But just one, it would be like, the resolution would be like 1 by 10,000 or something. Like there's a lot of pixels in one direction. And he shot a video of a train moving by, almost like a slit scan. And then he does work to correct the image. So he writes software to make the image like really uniform. So you get this photograph of the inside of a train that would be impossible to photograph using like kind of normal camera technology. So I think there's really beautiful things that you can do with cameras and code, but I don't know about fashion photography. I'm not entirely sure.
I saw some great examples of people, using pixel sorting when it comes to fashion. I think it's, just great, looks great, and I think it's not that hard to do.
Pixel sorting.
Yeah, pixel sorting. You sort the pixels.
Yeah, there's if you search for, I think it's called ASDF. It's just a technique where you do you can do, computer's really good at sorting things, so you can take like a line of pixels and sort them by brightness, and sort of take an underlying image, and then there's this thing. Kim Asendorf is an artist who has this like sorting technique that I find really beautiful. I don't know if that's what you're talking about or something else. Yeah. So search for Kim Asendorf's ASDF, and then also Rosa Mankman, who's one of the artists who we studied in my for this project that we did. She is a glitch artist, and she does really beautiful stuff with like file formats and messing with things like JPEG compression or other types of compression. She's written a book about glitch art and the theory behind it, but also the mechanics of how to do glitch stuff. So check out her work for sure. Other questions?
Do you think computers can make poetry on their own?
I think there's a genre of art which is which I find really beautiful. You should watch Alison Parrish. She's taught at SFPC. Alison Parrish. Am I spelling it right? Yeah, Alison Parrish. I'm not spelling it right. Alison Parrish. I/O. Her talk at I/O is really beautiful. She does. She creates bots, which are basically like software that she's written that are posting usually to Twitter, and she has this way of talking about them. Like she's almost creating like satellites and sending them out into space, and then they're reporting back. They're sending back photographs of what they find, and sometimes it's garbage, and sometimes it's really beautiful. And I think it is possible to create software that you can then let it run and have it find or create beautiful things and send that back. But I always think humans will be involved in creating these things and designing them or setting up the constraints. But that this kind of generative process that you could create an artwork that kind of you send out into the world and it finds beautiful things and sends back to you, I think that's a total possibility.
How can technology make us more human?
Well, I think, for an answer to that question, I think that woman I mentioned, Sara Hendren, check out her talk. Her talk at I/O was probably one of the best talks I've ever seen in my life. This I/O 2015, this is like a groundbreaking talk. This is the artist I said was doing workshops with skateboarders and people in wheelchairs. I think there's a whole field around assistive technology, which is kind of extending design principles using technology to extend the body and to respond to constraints. I think that's like the purest way that technology can make us more human. I think it also tools that help us communicate better with each other, that help us express ourselves better, like they can make us more human. Other questions?
How's your student after graduating from your course?
How are my students?
Yeah.
They're terrible. They're super unhappy. They want a refund. they go in different directions. So some students actually come. We have a pretty big alumni now because we've been running for 4 years. So some students come back and help us organize or help teach. Some students go on to graduate school. Some students were like mid-career and came to our school and go back or go to a different job. Or, you know, and a lot of the students produce work, and it's really hard in 10 weeks. It's, I think it's possible to end the 10 weeks with a really nice prototype, but many of them go on to take their ideas. Like, I'm really happy if you come in with a bunch of questions, but then you leave with some questions that drive your work forward. And so some students are really, they start an idea at the school and they finish it up later, and they create really beautiful work. Yeah, and they're all different. They all go, like, I think in how do I draw? I don't know what I'm doing here. I can draw a diagram. I have to load Photoshop though. I think in most schools, I'm gonna try to explain this. I think an image will help. New. Not enough pixels. All right. So let me make this small. Let's do this. Okay. In most schools, you have like I'm gonna make this really small. In most schools, like a boot camp type school, like everybody's in the same, starting in the same position, and like they're all gonna go to the same position, right? Like usually, if you have a school that's like, I'm gonna learn, learn how to program like Ruby on Rails in 10 weeks, then everybody like starts in the same place and it ends in the same place. And our program, it really feels like a lot of like different directions. That's way up. Usually, like starting in a different place and ending in a different place, and we just try to be like facilitators for people's journey. But we always want the direction of the arrow to be up, and for people to be learning the things that they want to that push them forward. But they go in different directions, all different directions.
Thank you for the graph.
Yeah. Could it be that? I mean, if you put a line through all of those on the right, you really end up with the same picture as on the left.
But I think the idea is that they're starting in different places and they're ending in different places, and that's really important. Which is most like boot camp type programs, because it's a short time, right? It's 10 weeks, and so most boot camp type programs like really are designed with this model. But SFPC is designed with this model, which is like, how do we actually like not try to put people in a circle, but understand them for who they are, where they want to go.
Sure. Path versus opportunities.
Yes. Yeah.
Does that then also mean that you don't have an expectation of the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I try to not I try to not put a lot of expectations because it's 10 weeks, right? And so what happens in 10 weeks is that we have like a week which is really designed to help group dynamics, help people work with each other. Then there's like 8 weeks of classes, and then we have a week of exhibition and kind of showing things at the end. And I want students to I want students to grow, and I want them to be engaged and to be open. But I don't want to say like, you need to learn X or Y or Z in 10 weeks. Some things will take a lot of time. Some things will be really quick. And I think that trick is to create an environment where even where where we can celebrate the struggle of learning something, where it's like not all about successes, but also about this is hard, this isn't working, failure is also recognized. And then, I don't know. I want it to be like as low pressure at the end as possible, and for people to feel like they get what they want out of it. And a lot of times it's like people will have breakthroughs at different times. Simona, who did the project about food and data visualization, she was struggling for weeks about how she really wanted to do a data viz project. She didn't have the right data set. Then she found this data set that connected with her life, and but she didn't know how to do it. She didn't know how to calculate it, and it was like it's kind of struggling, and then having the breakthrough. And students will have those breakthroughs, and you just try to like help them get there however they can, either by the right conversation, the right introduction to a work, bringing in different people, different voices. A lot of times it's just through conversation, and I'm happy if students have if they have breakthroughs, and they get somewhere, they end up somewhere different than they started.
On that, with the work with students, probably of any age, if good friends who travel around doing this sort of constructionist type learning, is they talk about, it's called a book called Invent to Learn, and they talk about mouth up versus mouth down frustration. So when you're working with students, you have to realize, for instance, this you just talked about with the data set, how much of was mouth down frustration. That's when the teacher steps in and assists and helps, guides, does what they can. If they have mouth up frustration, you kind of leave them alone and let them enjoy that struggle. It's so you're constantly kind of monitoring around that. And that's kind of what I'm hearing that you a little bit of the approach that you're doing.
That's a super great way to say it. I love that. That's great.
It's not mine.
One question: how do you decide on the students, the admission of the students?
Yeah, I think I have like really very simple criteria, which is that question, what do you want the school to be? That is one of the most important things. I just like that here. I think it's important for us to see, it's really, it's really different what we're doing. So it's important for me to hear that students are open with a kind of alternative education model, and, and to hear what they want to make, and to kind of like their vision becomes the vision of the school. And then I also care not about their portfolio or their work, but do they have an open personality? Are they, and it may not be necessarily through social media or open source or whatever, but are they going to work in an open way? Because I find the best students are the ones that are open in some way towards their work. And so you can see that people who are like, posting, maybe they have a very active Instagram account, or they're posting on Twitter a lot, or they're sharing links, or they're, engaged, writing articles, or whatever. If they're, not that they need to be like posting all the time, but if they have an open attitude towards their work. And sometimes we can see that through talking to them, through an interview or whatever, or how they write about their work or what they want from the school. But to me, that's really important. The best students are the ones that are open, work in an open way. But I don't care if they're beginners, if they've been doing this for a long time, if they're young, if they're older, that doesn't matter.
Yeah. So in the first year that you ran the program, did students like go sketching out of themselves, or did you stimulate it? Did they start making sketches, like one sketch a day?
I mean, I started the sketches last year, so we've been running the school for 3 or 4 years. So we're not doing. I wasn't talking about that 4 years ago.
But you mentioned you picked it up as like from your. It
was almost like not a homework assignment, but we kind of gave them a small framework to create these sketches. Some of them have continued sketching. Some of them are doing other stuff. I don't think there are some of them that are doing kind of daily, doing daily sketches the way I do it, but not everyone. But they definitely enjoyed that process, and I think creating artworks that a lot of people can contribute to in a very small way. That the student was
website for 100 days.
Oh yeah.
You know about it? It's like this girl.
I don't know that, but I know people do games, like a game a day. But it's I've heard about it. She's doing
Yeah, and she starts out with like a really simple website, and over the course of 100 days, she makes like 100 websites, like one every day.
Yeah.
And her skill level just goes like through the roof. And I always show that to my students and say like, hey, actually, if you make like small changes every day, then in 100 days you can end up somewhere amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable, and I like, I encourage the students. I think some students get frustrated because they, it's sometimes really hard to share things that you're not proud of, right? And so they have, like, the challenge is to get to a point where you can make something that you're proud of every day, or you lower your inhibition about sharing work, which is work in progress, and sharing things that are, that may not feel like finished work, that are really rough. And I think anything that you can do to help students get over that inhibition is really helpful.
Yeah. Do you ever see students like learning like in big chunks?
Like making big jumps?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Some students have really tremendous breakthroughs, and it could be finding the right project, the right platform, the right community. Students make really big jumps. Yeah. Other questions? Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Whenever I want students like make big jumps, they always fall into the right. And because it's just a loop, right? And then you're like, oh well, you wanted to make a big leap, and now you kind of fell down. And now the time